Hey, what's up, guys? How's everyone doing on this early Saturday morning? I wanted to go over this video. Going through the old Chad Daybell home, and after the aftermath of the Chad Daybell Lori Vallow trial, and what they're planning on doing with the home, which is kind of almost reflects the Idaho case, the Idaho 4 case, I should say, where they torn down the crime scene. The nonprofit that purchased the Daybell home wants to do the same with that home. But before I get into that, I just had a huge milestone for the channel today. I reached 5,000 subs, and a lot of you, my subscribers, know about the hardships I went through in my life. Well, yesterday afternoon, I should say Thursday afternoon. Yesterday was Friday, so Thursday afternoon, I was at a gas station by my house, and mind you, the one of my felonies was aggravated robbery from 2004, and I was at a gas station near my house, and I ran into one of my victims from that case, and I just kind of froze because it's been 20 some odd years since the crime, and they looked over at me, and they started walking up to me, so I was expected for them to like punch me in the face for what I did to them back then. And they walked up to me and looked at me and says, "I forgive you." I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. They was like, "I know you weren't in your right mind back then, but I forgive you." That one gesture of "I forgive you" lifted a tremendous weight off my shoulders that I have been carrying for the past 20 some odd years from that case. I always, you know, thought to myself, well, what would happen if I ran into one of the victims from my case? What would I do? What would they do? What would I say? What would they say? And Thursday afternoon, I got my answer. They forgave me. Now, if they could forgive somebody who robbed them 20 something years ago, that gives me hope that, for the people out there who's probably going through the same thing that I am, carrying this huge burden of, can I be forgiven? My answer to that question is yes, you can be forgiven. It doesn't matter what you've done in your life. Eventually, you'll be forgiven. Just like I was forgiven Thursday afternoon. Now, let's get into this video, guys.
It's Justin Lum with Fox 10 News, and joining me is Nate Eaton, news director for East Idaho News. Nate, thank you for joining us. You've always been so great in recapping with us, collaborating with us, and talking about a case that we have been covering for about 5 years now, the Vallow Daybell case. And the reason why we're talking is because of this fascinating insight and access you've given us inside the former home of the Daybells. Just first off, let's get right into it. What stood out to you in that surreal moment?
The home was much smaller inside than I thought it would be. I know it's a small home from the outside, but walking through the halls are very narrow. There's one bathroom, 4 bedrooms. And the whole time I'm in there, I'm thinking, this is where Tammy Daybell used to cook for her family. This is where Chad Daybell maybe wrote his books or played on the computer. You think about a family that's lived there for years and you're just inside a home. And then obviously the most, I don't know, the hardest room to be in, I guess you could say, in the house would be where Tammy Daybell died, where she took her last breath there in the master bedroom. And it makes you wonder what really happened that night. We still don't know what happened and what led to her death. And then also the closeness of the bedroom of Garth Daybell to his parents. I mean, it was two of my steps right there. So you could have heard everything, I would imagine. I mean, again, it's a small house. So that was in the main portion of the house. Then I was able to walk over into the what they called the cozy cone during the trial. This was the loft area where Chad was staying after he came back, after Lori was arrested. And I will say that probably had the most eerie feeling out of the whole house, being up there. John Pryor made a huge deal during the trial. You remember, Justin, about whether there was stairs and whether there was an upstairs. And even if there was it a livable space? I mean, there was 5 or 6 plugs in there. There was lights. You could very easily stay in there. So yeah, that was kind of the overall look at the actual house. And then going out on the property, that was just so sad that you could still see where JJ was buried. The ground is different. And then the spot where Tylee was buried.
Like he said, there was a very eerie feeling on that 3rd floor. And this case is very sad. 2 children lost their lives on that property.
They've removed the paver stones that were around the fire pit, so there's no more fire pit. But knowing that that's where those children were disposed of, just a sad, eerie, tragic place.
And I could get that feeling just from watching your report and your basically tour for us. And it's not an easy thing to do, but just the vastness of the backyard and how much land there is. And just, this was a massive crime scene, June 9th, 2020. And to recap for everyone, I mean, this is where 2 young children were found buried in the ground, like you just said. And then Tammy Daybell, Chad Daybell's first wife, murdered in her own bedroom. But at the time, Lori Vallow was not believed to be at this location at all, but she's also been convicted in the murders and conspiracy of it all. What else comes to your mind, or the questions that would pop into your head in comparing the time from June 2020 to walking through the house now? I mean, you've got all the views, you've seen it all at this point.
The new owners, the property is now owned by a nonprofit, and the people that run the nonprofit have asked to be anonymous. But we've been chatting over the past few weeks, and they asked me on one of our very first calls, do you want to go through the house? And I said, no, I don't want to go through the desire. I have no desire to go through the house. But then I got thinking about it, and I thought that house, that property, played such a pivotal role in the trial, in the events of the past 5 years, in the entire case. And as a journalist, I called them back and said, I actually do want to go through the house. And so I went with my wife, and we went up there. It is such a large pasture out back. But then again, to get a frame of reference as far as where the tree was, where JJ was, because I've only seen this from the road, as I think you have, Justin. I mean, it's not like they were inviting the media through. Many of the investigators have not even been back since they served that warrant. You can't just come and go on someone's property. So to actually see it and to look out the windows where Chad Daybell looked out every day, and you can see right where those kids were buried, to be in the same room where Tammy was, to see where Alex Cox likely drove his truck down, and And also just seeing the layout of where he was shooting from. You know, we knew that he parked down the street, but where are those driveways laid out? So it actually made a lot more sense to me now, having been there and seen it. I wish I could have done this years ago and then understood a little bit more during the trial. But yeah, it helped lay out the scene. And now with the house, you know, being torn down and the buildings being torn down, there'll be a different feel there, I think.
Unhealthy food is tough to dodge. So start with one healthy choice. One salad, one more piece of fruit, one more scoop of veggies. Discover the power of one healthy habit at shapeyourfutureok.com, a program of TSET.
And what do you think that's going to be like for the community that you've covered as well, and you've been so entrenched in, and you live in this community. You've spoken to these people who are so tied to this story. And what's that going to feel like when this property is no longer sitting there?
When this property is no longer sitting there, it's just an eerie coincidence to what happened there in Moscow. The university had the crime scene torn down. This nonprofit is having this crime scene torn down. Is it money motivated, just like they're in Moscow? I mean, it is a nonprofit, so is it money motivated to have this crime scene torn down as well?
I think a lot of people are relieved. I know a lot of people don't want like a playground. They don't want a place where people are going to come and visit. I think they just want to get back to normal life, and they don't want like a tourist stop. As morbid as that sounds, but in reality, that's been happening the past 5 years. People from all over the country are curious. We want to see these things, where these, you know, cases we followed. And so they've been stopping by and seeing the property. I got an interesting email from the original people that own that house, the children of the people. They've now passed away, but the kids have told me that they have such different feelings because they grew up there, and that was a place where all the kids in the neighborhood would gather to play kickball on summer nights, where they would hang out together and run around and play tag and play baseball. And the house was in much better shape than it is now, and they had swings from the trees. And she sent me photos of how it used to look, and you realize that that's how they want to remember this property. And they were a little sad when they heard it was going to be torn down, but they realized that for the good of everybody, it's probably best.
It is really such a fascinating look, because this house, this land, is the root of this whole case, because Chad Daybell, being one of the main co-conspirators, this is where he wrote his fictional books. This is where his ideas came to play. This is where he spoke to people that followed him, his own family members that believed in his visions he claimed he was having. And from afar, Lori Vallow was listening to him and asking him questions about death percentage.
I wonder what kind of visions he was having. Homicidal visions, suicidal visions, visions of what he wanted to do with the property. We'll never know, because he's been sentenced to death.
And light spirits and dark spirits. I mean, it's all coming back to us now as we talk about this. This is where it all really started, this little house. And you kind of take us through even things that were mentioned in trial or said in text messages by Chad, as to what he may have been thinking and feeling from his perspective, as wrong as he is now a convicted murderer, but what his perspective was from this house.
Right. Well, and I kept thinking that home is so small that you couldn't have a conversation on the phone with somebody and not have someone else in the home hear it. And granted, it was echoey because had been emptied out. There's no furniture left, but it would be very hard to keep a secret, I would think, in that house. I'm sure it can happen, but it's not like you could go into a room and get away from everybody unless you went up into that loft area, which he moved up there. And maybe that's a lot of the times where he spoke with Lori. The other thing that stuck out to me is I cannot imagine Lori Vallow, from everything we know about Lori, living in nice homes with Charles, driving nice cars, having money, taking good care of herself. I cannot imagine her living in that house. That it doesn't fit the type of person that Lori is. The house was dirty. It was grungy. It's old. And again, it's been years since Chad lived there, but I just can't imagine Lori moving in there. And that's obviously why she never did. Well, I don't know if that's obvious, but that's one of the reasons I'm sure she never did. So yeah, it would be a place where Chad was texting her from those very walls and planning these things.
Basically, he's saying Lori Vallow is a snob. She's a rich snob who wouldn't live in anything like that.
And just a lot of heartache and tragedy there.
Yeah, and the fact that there was some planning or potentially a plan of a manufactured home in the backyard. We had learned that in trial too, that Chad was interested in building in the area where before the kids were found, whether that was for him and Lori to live in his mind at some point that she would get out of jail, or if it's just to, add to the cover up. But this land, I guess, you were able to go into the shed too. I mean, this was all part of evidence. The access that you were able to get. Do you think that you ever seen or been a part of something so close in this whole case?
No, I didn't think I would. And like I said, I wasn't originally interested in it. It was interesting going into that shed because, as you mentioned, we saw photos in the trial of the tools that were in that shed and laying there on the ground that the police laid out, and then walking out the door and being able to see, okay, that's where Tylee was, and here is in reference to the shed. So it was just about 10, 15 feet to go back and forth to maybe get tools around there. And as far as the cement pad that you mentioned that came up in the trial, that Chad, they were looking to put a mobile home on that property and looking for a cement pad right where Tylee was buried, that would have made sense. It was a big open space. It would have been next to the shed garage building out back. So yeah, if you were going to put it there, put it right there on that pad. And of course, that would have covered her remains and made it a little bit harder to discover her, a lot harder. So it makes you wonder what was going on in his mind, in Chad's mind.
So he planned on building a mobile home there and covering up Tylee's remains. If he would have done that, they would have never found Tylee's remains because it would have been under a concrete slab with a home sitting on top of it. That just shows you how much of a mastermind he was, trying to cover his tracks.
Now what will become of it? The investigators, I know some of them are interested in going back out to the property. Some of them could care less. They don't want to see it. They've left that behind. Too many traumatic memories, which is understandable. And so, they don't want to see it.
So at this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you have been into the storage unit that Lori rented to put all her kids' belongings in when they were missing. You've been to the home now, the Daybell home, where these murders have been a part of this huge crime scene way back when. And you've been to the Idaho State Prison where Chad is. You've been to where Lori was before being extradited here. I mean, is there any other location or part of this case where you would like to entrench yourself in for your reporting?
Oh man, that's a good question. I'll say, Justin, you mentioned the storage unit. I can say that the similar type of feelings that I had there when we opened up that garage and started to see Lori's items and these pictures of the kids way back before we knew where the kids were or anything. Those same type of uneasy feelings I also had at the Daybell property. It you just feel a little bit unsettled, like, something wasn't right there. I don't know if there's anywhere else. The Daybell home kind of where it was. I did go to the Idaho Women's Prison and toured it. I didn't see Lori, but I got to kind of get a look at what things are like in there. And I also went out to the men's maximum security facility where Chad currently is. They didn't allow me to go inside, but I saw it from the outside and spoke with the Idaho Department of Correction. I think those are kind of it. Obviously, I'd love to go back and interview them, as I'm sure you would too, as any reporter would. I don't know if that's going to happen, but those are kind of the main spots. Who knows where the story could go, though, Justin? Something could come up during the Arizona trial of a new location that we've never heard about, and suddenly that's where we want to go and check it out.
Yeah. I mean, does it necessarily add new information to the story? Maybe not, but I think the insight and perspective would definitely be a contribution. I mean, there are multiple places in the valley here in Arizona as far as the home Charles Vallow was renting, the Brandon Boudreaux home, and I've been there just outside where he was shot at in October 2019. I think Lori's old townhome. You talked to a realtor, but had you been inside the townhome?
Here in Rexburg?
Yeah.
I have not been inside. I've been outside, but I haven't been in. That might be another interesting place to go to see that townhome. I imagine somebody is living there. There's some thought that, we know that nefarious things were happening there at the townhome, but that's the last place that JJ was seen alive, and who knows where Tylee was actually killed. I guess those are still the big, huge, outstanding questions that we will have. And one of the other things too, Justin, speaking about the house, is to kind of give people a frame of reference where that Salem church was. That came up a lot in the trial. Alex Cox's phone was pinging there. Chad went there to read his books. I drove the distance for people to get an idea. It was about 3 minutes. Oh, wow. So if on the night Tammy Daybell died, Alex was parked at that church. Chad Daybell, realistically, not saying I know this happened, but he could have picked Alex up, driven down to the house in 3 minutes, done whatever was there at the house, and then taken him back to the church in 3-minute drive. And then we know that the cell phones kind of stopped there at the church, and then it picked up with Alex headed toward Idaho Falls. So the timetable is very probable, very realistic, and very close enough to the house, but not next door to where you could, maybe say, oh, well, I was just at the church for something else, or whatever. So it helped to kind of see the distance. That's the staging area the police used the day that the kids were found. And that's where the road was closed, or further down the road where we couldn't get access to. So that's another interesting thing. And I know some people might be like, well, this is so voyeuristic. Why is this newsworthy? What is it? And I can understand that point, but I also understand the point that, this is a case you and I have followed for 5 years. Mm-hmm. We know so many aspects of it. To actually be there on the ground and witness it firsthand gives you another perspective. Yeah. And
to actually be there on the ground and witness it firsthand gives you another perspective. I wholeheartedly agree with that statement this gentleman has made.
that's what it's done. It had to see, oh, this is the place where JJ was buried, where they talked about so often the pond and everything, and to see where Tylee was and to see the driveways. It gives you a whole different perspective that hopefully, as reporters, our job is to inform the public, that this can inform people who are interested.
And we still have questions about Alex Cox's specific involvement on the night, overnight, October 19, 2019, when Tammy was killed. Like you said, he was located nearby. And there are theories by investigators, prosecutors, but he's not alive to have ever defended himself and stand trial, even though he was listed as one of the co-conspirators in this whole case. And we know he was located at the backyard on the days after JJ and Tylee had last been seen with timestamps, but physically seeing him visually, we've never been able to see that. We've only been able to locate him by cell phone data. And you in this video give us access and insight into how, he could have arrived those mornings, with how huge that land is, how huge the backyard is, and the entranceways and the different avenues that could have been taken. And you know, just to rewind again, June 2020, you were up in the sky looking at everything from above. And so, yeah, I think it's very important. And last thing I ask you, a little personal, but your photographer was your wife in this case. I mean, I've got to ask you, what was that like, bringing her in with you? And she did a great job, by the way. That's why I was really shocked documenting all of this. I know it's not her day job, but to go through this whole house with you and you guys feel the emotions and just the vibes of all of this. And she's been there with you since day one on this case and heard everything and seen everything. I mean, that had to be something just rare.
Right. And, that wasn't the plan. Originally wasn't to have her come. But it was a Sunday night, and it was last Sunday night, and I didn't want to, have to call one of my coworkers to come in when they were off. And I said, "Do you want to come with me up to the house?" And she said, "Yeah, I'll come." And I said, "Would you mind videoing?" And we weren't sure how much video we were going to do. And plus, I think it adds a different perspective. My wife's a mom. To people see things differently, and to have her talk about what she saw. There was one point where we became separated. I was out back, and she went to, I think, close the blinds because the people who own the property had to leave. So we were there by ourselves for some time. And so Erica went to close the blinds, and I was out back. And after a minute or two, she came back and she said, "I want to stick together. I don't want to go in there by myself." And you think about any stranger's home, being in there late at night in a vacant house, it feels a little creepy. But then knowing what we know about this property, it would have been very creepy to be there by ourselves. So she was able to see it differently. And I think one of the things that impressed her and me too, Justin, you referenced, we saw things from the air, or I saw things from the air that day, but we didn't know 80% of what we know now. To see that Tammy Daybell used to drive along that back driveway, and to see where Alex could have parked down the street, and if he had a good scope on his gun, he really could have gotten out of his car, fired at her, and hit her without really moving, and then gotten on his truck and driven away, which was probably the plan. But when Tammy didn't park on that back driveway and she parked in the front, his plan was off. And he then had to move himself. He then had to run or walk quickly, probably run because of the time frame, and run across the grass and fire at her then. But by that point, the gun misfired, which the investigators said if you jostled that gun, it could misfire. So to see it all actually there, be like, yeah, that would have been a distance, and he would have had to run across the lawn. And it makes sense now, the area, laying it on.
So Alex Cox was a conspirator. Like they just said, Alex Cox is no longer with us. I'd like to know how Alex Cox died. But I mean, it's wild to find out that there was a third person involved in this case.
All out and seeing it with our own eyes. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something from outside the house that simply going there, you can see, oh, that makes sense. Whereas why the gun? Why he couldn't have hit her? Had she parked in the back there that first day, who knows? Who knows what would have happened?
Exactly. And then 10 days later, after the misfire, she was asphyxiated in her bedroom. And all this after the kids had already been buried after their murder. So terribly sad. And again, just great work being able to go in there, do your reporting in such an emotionally charged.
Wow. This was my first time ever hearing about Alex Cox. But I would like to say this. We have the 1122 King Road crime scene that was torn down. And now we're having the former home of Chad Daybell torn down. Could this be money motivated as well? Or could it be that the people there around the home just want it gone? Because you heard that reporter say they don't want a park put there. They don't want it being turned into a shrine or a tourist attraction, which, like he said, it already is kind of a tourist attraction. But let me know down in the comments your thoughts and your opinions on this revelation that they're going to be tearing this crime scene down as well. Like always, like, subscribe, and share my channel. Hit that bell notification for any new uploads. And you guys have a good Saturday. This is Robert with True Crime Podcast, and I'm out.
Devil in a red dress, call 911, I'm a killer. You know I hate to come fast.